good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to The Future is Female. This is the show where we find the extraordinary in every woman. I'm so delighted to introduce my guest today. She's Mediha Mahmood. She's the Executive Director of the Communications and Multimedia Content Forum of Malaysia, CMCF, or the Content Forum for short, because it's such a mouthful. Mediha, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank
Good of you to join me. Now, I looked at the blurb on the website of the Content Forum. It says, if I just want to quote it, overseeing and promoting self-regulation of content over electronic networked mediums.
Right.
And that to me sounds like a massive scope. So, okay, let's begin our conversation today by maybe helping, explaining to us a little bit about the role of the Content Forum as an industry self-regulatory body.
Yes.
And also what you do there and what you hope to achieve through it.
Okay, so you described it aptly. It is an industry forum. It promotes, advocates, and facilitates for self-regulation. And you know what I always like to explain to people is to just fix the perception that some people think the Content Forum is a regulator. And that's not exactly what we do. We are an industry forum that promotes self-regulation. Our members comprise of, for example, broadcasters like Astro. We've got advertisers, we've got civic groups, telcos, and you wouldn't call them regulators, right? So what they do is, being members of the Content Forum, we self-regulate by way of the content code. And this content code is something which basically sets the best standards and the best practices as well of what we would expect broadcasters, advertisers, the content players to abide by and comply with. And it's the point of it is very simple. We want to be able to spur creativity in the content industry. We want advertisers to make money, we want influencers to make money, but at the same time we want to prevent any harmful effects from coming from this content.
Right.
So that's what it does.
So if I understand this correctly, you oversee a bunch of people who come together
Yes.
and decide what code they want to live by
That's
when they
right.
work. So best practices, as you said, what would govern them. So they're deciding
Yes.
what works for them. And I think what's been really wonderful to see is just how much this code has evolved, been revamped, improved to keep up with contemporary
That's right.
times. Because I remember when I first started broadcast many years ago, the code was very basic, cut and dry, very specific about what you can and can't do. But now it includes things like children's rights and information accessibility for
right.
persons with disabilities, women's representation.
Yep.
So I love the fact that there's been a kind of updated code. And this happened last year.
Yes.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that, how you kept it up with contemporary issues.
Okay, so the beauty of the content code is that it's a code that we all make together. It doesn't need to go through the legislative process. It doesn't need to be debated in parliament and things like that. So that's why it's very flexible. You can adapt it to whatever is happening now. And so last year when we did the content code revamp, we decided that it was really timely for us to do it because the content landscape has changed so much. I mean, in the past 10 years, you would not have expected to see such a huge role being played by influencers, for example, in advertising, right? And the fact that now you're getting content not just from TV, you're getting it as long as you have internet, you've got multiple platforms, right? So we felt that there is a need for us to address the issues that have come with that. And it was a really good process because we want it to be inclusive. It's not something that just Content Forum members sat down and come with it and you guys had to comply. No, it's a process where the members looked at it, we had lawyers looked at it, and then we went through a public consultation process.
Okay.
So that lasted for a few months, where we got the members of the public to also come in and give their feedback. And I think that was really good for us because there were a lot of things that members of the community saw that we didn't. That
For
we
instance,
may have missed.
for example,
one example that I can give you is responsible reporting of suicide. Now, this was something that was that we didn't include at first, but it was highlighted by doctors, by medical practitioners, and also by members of the public and NGOs who felt that there was a bit too much of unethical reporting of suicide going on, not just by broadcasters, but also by members of the community who are on social media. If something happens in a mall, people really quickly want to take pictures and videos and spread it on social media, and they don't realize how absolutely harmful that is.
Why
people.
is it harmful?
Suicide contagion. Now, a lot of people that I've spoken to didn't realize that suicide contagion was a thing. Because they think about viruses, you can get viruses, but you can't. How is suicide contagion a thing? Why would you be having those feelings or would act upon it just because you see the media reporting on it? But countless research has shown that it is, because people who are already vulnerable, who are already in that space, can get, I don't know if I should be using this word, but can get triggered by harmful reporting of other people's suicides. And we spoke with academicians on this. We did the reading. We benchmark with the laws that are already out there in other jurisdictions. And one of the examples that I can give you that may be clear on how this works is a Netflix show a while back. It was a series about a teenage girl who died by suicide, and then it just showed the aftermath of it. And that show, right after that show, the number of attempts made by teenagers rose. The numbers of death by suicide by youth and adolescents rose. So there was a direct correlation as well. And this has been proven. I mean, I hate saying, do your research, but the research is out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for the skeptics out there, but it also just underscores the importance of, responsible reporting by newsrooms. And I think as we become more aware and educated about these issues, we can then ensure that we follow this content code. Glad that was addressed in the content code. One of the other things that, Mediha, I was really pleased to see was the way it addressed online abuse and gender-based violence. Tell me a little bit about how the code aims to correct some of this very problematic behavior.
Right. Now, I have to give credit to one of our members from NCWO. So Dr. Kiranjit, she made it very clear that this is something that we needed to include in the content code. And it was very clear to us as well when we did the research. Online abuse and gender-based violence disproportionately affects women. And that is seen in the fact that the targets for cyber stalking, for cyber harassment, for morphing, for everything else out there.
What's morphing?
Okay, morphing is when they take your visual and morph you into, for example, a porn star. So yeah, it's more commonly done. The targets are usually women. And it's basically like Photoshop in the old days.
Deep fake type things.
Yes, deep fake types, exactly. So I always say that the violence that you see, or the threats that women have been experiencing so long before the internet came, is just then brought to the internet. For example, I was in an all-girls school, and we used to have a problem of flashes.
Oh, same. Yes, I remember that from school.
It's not a laughing matter. It's really traumatizing for children, right? But they would have to go to the school grounds and flash. But right now, you can get unsolicited penis pictures. Yes. And their targets can be even wider because you don't actually have to physically go to a girl and flash, right? So same with cyber stalking. You no longer have to actually stalk person in front of her house. You can go on go on her social media, and you find out people who check into wherever they have coffee, to where you work, to where you hang out every Saturday night with your friends. So these are things that women have and are experiencing, and we feel that there is a need to address it in the content code. So that's what we've done with that provision.
So what then happens? I mean, so this is all kind of incorporated in the code, and hopefully it empowers women to then speak up if something happens to them online, and they would do that to the content forum. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, we'll talk a little bit about how to empower the public to speak up when something happens, or when they feel that their rights have been impinged upon. I do want to still remain on the issue of women in content, the media, in advertising. How has the content code evolved in that respect? Because again, times have changed.
Yes.
Keeping it contemporary, post Me Too.
Yes.
How has the content code been revamped?
One thing about the provisions in the content code, it has always been protective of women and minorities and children. But we've enhanced it even so that portrayals of women should always be it should not be perpetuating stereotypes and harmful biases and things like that. Now, if you're definitely not old enough, but in 20, 30 years ago in advertising, women were constantly exploited. Stereotypes were prevalent, you know, and it was something that was very obvious, but things have changed for the better. But things can change to be even more better. So anyway, when we talk to advertisers or when we talk to people who make advertisements, it's always trying to convince them that they can also help to change perception. You don't have to show, you know, whenever there's a dishwashing liquid advert, it doesn't have to be the woman who's always at the sink, for example. Adverts should reflect society now. And we've got stay-at-home dads, we've got moms who work, we've got fathers who are always in the kitchen, you know, cooking and stuff. So these are things that we need to see reflected on broadcast to make it, we not normalize it, it's already normal, but it should be there to break any other remnants of stereotypes or biases that's still out there.
Right, we're going to take a very quick break, but let's come back and continue this conversation with Mediha Mahmood on The Future is Female. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to The Future is Female. I'm Melisa Idris. I'm chatting today to Mediha Mahmood. She is the Executive Director of the Communications and Multimedia Content Forum of Malaysia, CMCF, Content Forum for short. We were talking about kind of women's, representing the society in the content that we see. We want to see an equal and inclusive society, and that also includes persons with disabilities, which for a long time I think has been, content has been not equally accessible to them. What work has the Content Forum been doing on this in this regard?
This is something that we feel very strongly about. Persons with disabilities, there are many angles to take when you talk about content. And number one is content itself. The portrayals of persons with disabilities should not be harmful to them. For example, it's usually in comedy shows where people make fun of or use disabilities as a form of an insult, so things like that. So we've included that in the content code. So it shouldn't be something that, humor or ridicule should not be targeting persons with disabilities or perpetuate harmful stereotypes and biases of discrimination. Secondly, and most importantly, is the fact that persons with disabilities need to have equal access to information. Yeah. And that's very important now. So in the content code, we've made a provision already that there needs to be accessibility for persons with disabilities, especially when it comes to, for example, news. Either you have sign language interpreters or you have closed captions. And the ideal world would be that every single content you see out there is accessible to persons with disabilities. Right. That's ideal.
I think there's also a misunderstanding or maybe marginalization of what is needed, right? Yeah. So there's closed captions, the sign language interpreters, there's perhaps a need for transcripts for people with attention disorders. And, you have all the range of ways we can help make content more accessible. Are there challenges that you see in helping people move forward? Because, I say this with so much love, that this content code is a reflection of the kind of society we want to live in. Yes. Right? This is the standards we should live by, but there are often failings to live by that standard. Do you find it difficult, particularly for communities, people with disability, making content accessible for PWDs? That seems to be more of a bigger challenge for content providers compared to, say, respecting women or ensuring equality and representation.
I can share with you our experience in pushing through the provision for this. Okay. Like I said, it's really good that we had the public consultation. When we had the provision saying that there should be accessibility for persons with disabilities, I never thought that I would get anyone pushing back against it, because it's rights for persons with disabilities. But we did. We did get some pushback, and it all goes down, I'm sorry, but it just boils down to the money. Because when you talk about accessibility, you're talking about technology, you're talking about adapting to new things which would provide this access to persons with disabilities, and it comes with an investment. And like it or not, there are people out there who have their reasons for having to, looking at the bottom line. This may not be something they want to invest in. They may not see any profit coming out of it.
You put it in the code. You know that I'm going to have to strive towards that, right?
Exactly. That's the minimum standard to at least provide access. But it was a little bit of a debate there as well, because as much as we understand the industry needs to be able to meet the bottom line, but it's just something that we all need to work together to push for. Universal access for persons with disabilities is beneficial to all of us. And that's one thing that we consistently work with broadcasters and everyone else as well. We're not expecting change overnight.
Right.
But, it
work towards it. Work towards it for sure. I also like the way we're more aware of the rights of children now.
Yeah.
That was something maybe a couple of decades ago. We used to think children not as fully formed beings yet, and then I think there was a bit of a lack of respect for the rights of children. How does that play in, particularly with advertising?
Yes.
Because, I mean, children are far more exposed to advertising now than perhaps when I was growing up.
Absolutely. And if you look at the content code, we had a few pages addressing children in advertising.
Okay.
Because it is very important. You're absolutely right. Children are exposed to adverts a lot more. Like in my day, it was just ads in between my cartoon shows. You're just watching
and that's it. That half an hour cartoon segment, you'll have a couple of ads, and that would be it. There was no stickiness to it.
That's right.
Now
there is.
Every ad that comes their way.
Exactly. So they're not sitting down watching TV much anymore. They've got devices, they've got connected devices, and ads are coming in even through them playing games, pop-up ads and stuff like that. So they are inundated with ads. So we need to be able to make sure that the kind of ads that get to them are not harmful to them. And this is a process. I mean, just a few years ago, fast food advertisements were banned from being shown on children's content belts, right? Because they realized that it is harmful to kids. So it's constantly changing. So even now we have a lot of provisions with regards to children. Also to protect parents of children, we have this thing called, we realize there's this thing called pester power.
Oh, what is that?
Yes, so that's when a child, the kind of advertising that's being targeted to children, it makes them pester their parents to buy the product.
There's a phrase, there's a term for it, pester power.
Pester power, yeah. You should read some stuff on it. It's quite interesting. So there are ways for ads to incorporate messages to children that makes them pester their parents to buy.
I'm pretty sure I've seen this in action.
Yes. So we've put that in as well, and so many other things that we feel is really necessary for us if we are going to continue, and I think we will be continuing to allow our children to have access to content in all ways. We need to prepare them for the ads, and the ads need to be prepared to not be harmful to the children that they're targeted to.
And this also ties into this new age of the influencer, right? When they work with companies promoting a certain product, but don't make it explicitly known that it's a paid partnership. That comes under the content code as well.
I'm glad you brought it up. That's one of the key things that we included in the content code, because influencers are very influential now, especially when it comes to pushing products to their followers and their fans. So there is a requirement for influencers to disclose whenever their posts are paid for or sponsored. Because if you watch TV, you know it's an ad. Right? You're watching a show, it's an advertisement. But if you're looking through influencers' Instagram posts, you can't tell which one is an ad and which one is organic and something that she is truly enjoying.
Endorsing.
Yes. So you can't tell, is that coffee something she bought for herself because she likes it? Or is it because the coffee brand paid her to do it, right? So the only way to be fair to consumers is to have a disclosure. And it's very simple. I mean, all social media platforms already have the functions, paid partnerships, sponsored by. So it's just a matter of using it. And when we had this conversation with influencers, there was some pushback because I think they felt that we were trying to control them. But we had that conversation and said this is also protecting influencers as well, because you are being paid to say certain things. If what you're saying is actually against the law or unethical, you want to be sure that you're able to say, look, I was paid to do this. The persons responsible are my employers, for example, people who paid for it. So when they see that there's a benefit to that as well, and the fact that we're trying to make sure that the influencer industry is also seen as a legitimate profession instead of just a way to be conniving and trick consumers.
Right,
So it's beneficial to everybody.
I mean, we understand it's a livelihood. In the few minutes that we have left, Mediha, I want to kind of talk about the Complaints Bureau.
Yes.
Because in that regard, the Complaints Bureau empowers the public to speak up when they see something they feel uncomfortable with, or they think contravenes the content code.
Right.
How do you get that empowered public to speak up?
Okay. Anyone can make a complaint to the Complaints Bureau. If you see something that you think is a breach of the content code, just go to contentforum.my. There is a portal where you can put in your complaints.
Okay.
And what happens then is it goes to the Complaints Bureau, and the Bureau consists of a chairman who's an independent, and then also 6 representatives who are from different categories. So if you've got representatives in broadcasting, advertising, civic groups and the like, they will look at it and they'll decide if this was a breach or not.
Wow.
So if it's a breach, then you may be subject to sanctions, which can go up to compounds and stuff like that as well. But you know, if it's not, then it's at least you know that your content is fine. And that is another thing that I need to highlight. The compliance to the content code is an available legal defense. So if you put something out and somebody says, Melissa, this is against the content code, and then the Complaints Bureau says, no, it's not, it's fine. So if anybody goes to you and tries to take action against you for that, you can say, look, this
they said it's fine.
It's a legal defense.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. I like the idea of anyone being able to speak up, but the more we talk about what is in the content code, the more we realize, well, I'm going to speak up, and this is again contagion, right? I'm going to speak up if I see something I'm not comfortable with. Someone else will speak up, and that's how we ensure a more inclusive and just society.
That's right.
Are you happy with the progress that's been made? I know the content code's just been revamped last year, but when we think about the cultural change that this content code hopes to inspire, what are you happy with when you see progress, and also where do you think we have a little bit of work to do?
I'm very happy to see that it has at least triggered conversations, because I think like even now that we're having this conversation, conversations are an excellent way to advocate for things. Even if the conversation leads to a debate, even if you argue, that's fine. It's a catalyst for change.
Yeah, even if it leads to one person thinking about something in a different way, worth the conversation.
Absolutely. So I think that is one thing that we need to continue to do in our community. We need to have difficult conversations. We need to talk about things that used to be taboo, because we have a generation of digital, kids who are very adept with getting information. And if you don't have these conversations with them, who are they having conversations with? Or they might be completely in the dark, and then suddenly when you go out there, you get exposed to things that you were not familiar with. So to me, conversations that are triggered by the content code, whatever the conversations are about, some of which you've already mentioned in this session alone, is very important, and it's something that I hope to see more of in the future.
Well, Mediha, thank you for your work and your service and for being on the show today.
Awesome. My pleasure entirely.
That wraps up this episode of The Future is Female. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.